Everybody, welcome to the Finnegan Group Academy. Now within this session, what I wanted to walk through was what everyone actually knows who've turned onto this channel, the buy, refurbish, refinance and rent scheme. Now the reason why I said that everybody knows about it, if you go on any educators out there or if you go on any YouTube videos out there, they'll take you through the process, but what they will take you through is all the positives associated to that process. No one actually ever walks you through the negative side against how much cash you can potentially leave in the deal and the process which it goes from, you know, placing an offer on a deal to actually collecting the keys to the back end. No one, I don't think, from what I've seen, takes you through that process, and certainly not the reality. You might meet the so-called educators who tend to spiel a good spin, but ultimately, you know, the reality of how hard the process is, and certainly if you don't do your due diligence, as I didn't within this project, then ultimately you'll get your fingers burnt. So a little bit about the house itself before I move on to the next slide. I'll be really honest with yourselves. This is not one of my first properties. It was my third property, and the best way to describe it is me and my family had a small 2 up 2 down in Liverpool. We decided to move out of that property but rent it out because we had enough for a subsequent deposit. Moved into our second personal home, if you want to call it that. And then this was our third home, of which we tried to dabble into the BRRR strategy. And I'll be really honest, guys, when we went knee deep into this, we didn't know anything about any strategy, what the right thing to do, management schedules, all that normal stuff you would expect 8 years ago. We didn't know anything, and that's why I thought it would be worthwhile to bring out a video like this to ultimately take you through the cons, and one, if you're not educated enough through the process, how you can get burned, and ultimately how you protect your cash, which you can utilize elsewhere. So let's go straight into it. So what went wrong within the deal? The left hand side, let's go through there. So I'll explain the scenario to yourselves. Now, ultimately in 2018, you know, a lot of auctions were still face-to-face. Nowadays, a lot of the ones we buy are all online, but these ones were all face-to-face. Now, I went to an auction house in Bolton in 2018 with the intention not to buy. I'm really honest, not to buy. I went there for education purposes to understand what the feel, the momentum was like within the room itself. Now, a couple of things caught me out. One was emotion. You know, from going there from an education perspective to going there to actually sitting in the room and there's big players in there putting their hands up bidding, the emotion gets on top of you. Secondly, is the adrenaline. The adrenaline of people buying, people doing deals, all that good stuff of what you want to be part of gets you in that sort of momentum, and adrenaline kicks in. And what did I find myself doing? I found myself reviewing the catalogue on the day, guys, on the day, reviewing against which are the guide prices within the area I broadly live in, or certainly a 10-mile radius of where I could buy. And ultimately I went down the list. Well, these guide prices are 15,000. It's about 10 miles away from me. I could probably stretch what I've got in the bank. I could probably stretch what I've got on credit cards and all that good stuff to try and pull it all together to purchase a house. So let's just assume for this narrative, it was lot 32. Lot 32 comes in, 32,000, so on. Hammer fell. I was the person who bought that property, but you have to bear in mind, guys, when I bought it at £32,000, guys, 32,000 when the guide price was 15, I didn't have any experience in property. Yes, I had some personal and one rental, which was a new build, but I had no experience in property in terms of, you know, going through this process. I had no experience in trades. I had no experience in the auction process. Guys, I didn't even know that you had to complete within 20 working days when I put my hand up. All that due diligence I should have done at the start of the process, but I do bear in mind that I wasn't going there to actually bid and buy something. You know, I didn't do. And therefore, as a consequence, the reality actually sank in. When your hammer fell, doom, a man comes up to you, they take you to one side, it's a deposit you paid, which was around 10%. You sign your contract and so forth, and you legally exchange at that point in time, of which I didn't understand either. But because I went into it knee deep, momentum, adrenaline, emotion, it all kicked in, and therefore I found myself buying a property I didn't know the area really well. I didn't know the location in terms of rental demand at all. I've never even seen the property, or I've never been down the road. I've just never done it. And I was thinking when I started this process of education, how many people would naturally fall into the trap which I've done, adrenaline and emotion. And I think out of, a lot of people who want to get into property, certainly a lot of people would fall into that trap. I guarantee it. Fast forward then, when I exchanged on the property, I went to the toilet. And I remember sitting on the toilet scrolling into how much of the houses sell on the road. And trust me guys, it wasn't a good picture. But I'll save the numbers for the latter slides. So going back to, bear in mind all the what went wrong. Look at the pictures. Look at the pictures. And you have to take into consideration, I've never been to this property. I've never been to see the kitchen, see the needles, used needles on the floor, guys. Seen anything within this property, didn't know the condition. I can tell you this now, it needed central heating, no central heating. The kitchen was destroyed. Everything in this house was absolutely destroyed. And bear in mind, I couldn't understand what the makeup of the quote was or the tradesmanship's work to be completed on the property, because we've never been to it. So therefore then, what went wrong was absolutely everything, and what didn't play in my favour was the state of the property after we've collected the keys. Now, just ponder on this before we go on the next slide, because the next slide does bring a bit of positive around it, but the other slide after that takes you through the numbers, because I go back to, it was an auction purchase, guys, and therefore then you have a legal contract against that, conditions within it, ultimately what will bear costs. And that's something obviously I didn't review at that point in time, and therefore did affect me for when I did complete on the property, but we'll save that for the latter slides. So overall, like I said guys, wasn't a good story. What went wrong was absolutely everything, but that was through my fault, not through anyone else's. No one forced me in that position. I wanted to get into property. And then the left hand side here, ultimately what didn't play in my favour was the condition of the property. Also myself to blame. Let's see how it ended. So you can see what the end product was. Now, before I go through the left-hand side, the pictures, the pictures actually don't do it justice how this property turned out in respect to, I wouldn't call it a full rip out, guys, a half rip out in respect of half plastering. Yes, it needed all new plumbing for the central heating system, but what you see there, what you don't see, sorry, is the ceilings were left as they are with the Artex ceiling. And we improved the areas where we need to improve. And that wasn't because I didn't want to do it, that was because cash was an issue. And again, when I go to the next slide, it will demonstrate why. But ultimately what you can see here is the property at the end conclusion was actually lovely. It was a 2 up, 2 down, which I believe was meant to be someone who was ill, unfortunately passed away. The property went into the auction, and then we picked it up and revamped the property up, which was a good thing to do for the area, and certainly a good thing to do for prospective tenants. But it turned out to be a beautiful house in terms of the renovation itself. Now the left hand side, let's talk about some of the negatives, right? And the reality, let's say not the negatives, let's say the reality of this strategy. How long did it take us? 6 months it took us to renovate this project. 6 months. And that doesn't mean in respect to, the 20 working days to collect your keys or the refinance. I'm talking about the project itself to renovate. 6 months. And what did that entail? That's what people forget. It entailed me and my partner being there near enough every evening, every weekend. We were doing the jobs which we could do ourselves, and the jobs we couldn't do, unfortunately, we have to offload because, joinery, plumbing, electrician, you name it, you have to offload it unless you're experienced and certified within that area, of which we wasn't doing. So 6 months overall to do the project, which was a good and a bad thing. Learned a lot through that process, but ultimately 6 months on a small 2 up, 2 down. Questionable, was that the right strategy? Time delay. What caused us time delay? The biggest thing was actually trades. For anyone who's not been through the process of either doing small DIY in your own home, or they've never been through a process of renovation, just getting trades to turn up when you ring them, to give you quotations, to fulfill the obligations from the quote, to turn up and do the work. Mind blowing. you know, ultimately it was mind blowing, but that was one of the biggest causes. So me and my partner were there, as I said, near enough every evening and on the weekends as a cycle. But the trades let us down on most occasions. Fast forward now to 8 years, that's all been fixed now because we have what they call a golden team where we can, you know, divert people to all different projects. But when you're starting off and you don't know anybody, believe you me, it is a problem. And when someone doesn't deliver what they're obliged to do, whether you've paid them up front or whether you've contractually signed something and you're a beginner, trust me, it'll hurt you and it will hurt you throughout the process. Refurbishment costs, 16,000 refurbishment costs. Now it doesn't look like it on the picture, but things which certainly blow your budget. The property had no central heating, guys, absolutely none. Now back then in 2018, you know, to get central heating in a two up, two down, inclusive of a boiler, was minimal. You know, you're talking about 3,000 to 4,000 back then. Fast forward to now, far more expensive. Electricity upgrades, fortunately for us, it did have electrical rewire, but the consumer box, what sits up there, wasn't compliant. So that had to be changed. Flooring, bathroom, kitchen, joinery, doors, garden, the yard even, all that stuff cost money to do, and inclusive of the windows. The window quote, by the way, guys, when we first got this property, we got quoted by one company for 7,000, and trust me, for someone who didn't have that much money back then, yeah, trust me, that hurt me a lot. But ultimately, it came to about 16,000 refurbishment costs. The numbers I'll go through on the next slide, which is very interesting, and the low rental estimate. Now, bear in mind, yes, we rented out one of our first properties we lived in, but you know, a solid estate agent took over that, which was good. I didn't know this area at all, so really I've spent 16,000, but I actually don't know what the rental yield was within the area, which was a bit bizarre. But obviously when I'm going through the process, I'm interested, intrigued to understand. One of the estate agents came back around and said, for this type of property, £375 a month, guys. £375 a month for all this hard work, considering, you know, I went through the process, I didn't know what I was buying, where I was buying, the condition the property was in, and then ultimately, you know, turned out to be, you know, I'll call it a lovely property. For someone to turn around and said £375 a month, heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken. But go back to the way the house visually looks, it's good. You know, and it's still good to this day, which I'll move on to in a moment's time. So the end product was good. The schedule itself wasn't the best, guys, but you have to bear in mind when you're starting your new process in terms of any renovation, you've got to get burned to understand how to learn and develop. So there's pros and cons to the process. Now let's go through the numbers, because this is the most interesting bit no one takes people through. Right, the numbers then. So the purchase price in the auction, as I said at the start, was roughly 32,000, give or take 32,000, right? The refurb, as I said on the previous slide, was 16,000. Now get this, guys, the legal fees, right, to buy the property in the auction, I've just rounded it up at circa 10,000. And the reason being why it was 10,000 was, ultimately, I didn't read the legal pack on the day. Well, not on the day, I actually didn't read it. You know what, it doesn't matter if I read it on the day. Someone qualified and certified should have read it. 10,000. And that was incorporation of the auction house lister fees. It incorporated out, you know, the seller's legal fees and more. But ultimately it came to about £10,000. And then ultimately you refinance at the back end of the process, which I'll take you through in a moment's time. You know, the quantum of all that was £58,500, give or take. Give or take, that's what it was, £58,500. And I'll go back to, guys, when I was sitting on that toilet, I remember reading the property values in the area were like 40,000, and I remember that point in time very specifically that my heart sank. But let's see what the numbers did then. So end valuation, and like everyone who starts the journey, I was over optimistic in terms of what I wanted the house to be valued at. And the reason being is throughout the 6 or 7 months when I was doing the property, I was educating myself, I was understanding my LTV, 75%, therefore give me return on money, and therefore can understand how much I'll leave in the deal. So I put a broad value in of, let's say, circa 70,000, ultimately knowing it wouldn't come in at that because the sale history on the road wouldn't warrant that. And ultimately, if you put the radius out by 0.5 mile, which you shouldn't do anyway, it still wouldn't warrant that. The valuation, guys, came in at 50,000. 50,000. The mortgage then, 75%, £37,500. Now, from one perspective, one dimensional this is, guys. Money left in the deal, 21,000. But what I've not took you through is actually how I bought this property. Because I didn't use any bridging finance, didn't know what that was. Didn't use any sort of mortgage. Didn't really know the process to get through that apart from if you're buying a new build. How do you think I bought this? There's a couple of ways how I bought this with 32,000. Now, some would say you're too risky, risk adverse, whatever it is. But ultimately, I remember in my bank account, I had roughly circa 10,000 when I placed the bid and the hammer fell. Circa 10,000. I remember stepping outside of the auction and my partner said, we don't have any money to buy this property. And what I did on the day and the days to follow was credit cards. You name it, I took credit cards out left, right and centre. Utilisation of VAT and tax, which is certainly not recommended to anyone, but when you're put in under the pressure, unfortunately you've got to do things which you shouldn't do if you were in a normal state of mind. Loans, I took loans out, and ultimately I took out all loans to secure the 32,000 and the 10,000. Now the reason being, when I talk about VAT and all that good stuff, I was a well-paid self-employed contractor at that point in time. So we had good cash flow coming in, admittedly, which enabled me to offset some of the dangerous things which happened throughout the process, in terms of refurbs and so forth. But the utilisation of all the cash to enable me to do that project or to buy it, to refurb it and so on, was a mixture of all different things. Cash injection from the contractor job, utilisation of VAT and tax, which were due in probably 12 months time, whatever it was, and ultimately, therefore, as a consequence, I didn't need to actually put a refinance mortgage on top of it. But either or, the way you look at it, when I refinance all the funds, if you look at it cleanly, then circa 21,000 was left within the deal. Now, some people out there would say, God, that is an awful deal. And I'll be really honest with yourselves, guys. Yeah, it probably was. And the matter of the fact is, I actually didn't go through the process of what I do now. And that comes down to pure education, guys. Yeah, I had a little bit of cash and utilisation of credit cards and loans and all that good stuff. But ultimately, when push comes to shove, I didn't have the experience to get me through that process, and certainly through those dark days. And I'll be really honest, certainly tested mine and my partner's relationship back in 2018, noting that we had a newborn at the same time as well. Moving over to this side here then, so let's look at the numbers. So the rental per calendar month was higher than what was expected through the previous slides, right, guys? 375, we managed to rent out through an estate agent for circa £500, which was good. So that means the total rent was £6,000 a year, which was also good. I was still working at that point in time, being a contractor, still getting paid well, weekly. So the extra bit of bunch, and to say I'm a property developer, yeah, it was a good feeling to have, guys. Was it a good deal? Still questionable, right? Then you walk through the monthly expenses. You walk through the mortgage. I've assumed here 4%, but back then it was peanuts. So £80, and we did let it out through a letting agency, so let's assume it was £50 at that point in time for a fully managed service. Total expenses therefore come to 130. Simple maths, guys. You deduct the 130 from your 500 to get you to 370. What I've not added on top of that is your maintenance against the property, because that will happen. Stuff goes wrong, and stuff has gone wrong with the property. And certainly what don't take into account is other things like insurances and all that good stuff. But let's just make things really clean. I was left with a net profit per year of £4,440. Then divide that by the 21,000. Broadly, what the deal meant was I'd get my money back in about, I'll just round up to 5 years, which from an investor standpoint, 20% return on investment, is that good? It's not bad, guys. Is it the best deal? in 2018, if I knew the knowledge and knew what I was doing, it ain't the best deal. I'll be really honest, but because I was still working at that point of time to get a healthy income, to say I was a property developer, to learn on the experience what things went wrong in, yeah, I thought it was overall a good deal. Did I think at the end of the process though, guys, when I was walked out with this small amount here, I wanted to do more? I'll be honest, my partner didn't. She didn't want to do any more. And the reason being is the sacrifice of time to get you such a small provision of cost. Is it worth the weight in gold, so to speak? And for my partner it wasn't, for me it wasn't at the time, but you know, after a break of circa 3 to 4 months and then getting educated and then learn through the things I've done wrong, then ultimately then it's played out for the best. You know, if a new person would buy this deal with very little cash in the bank like I did, but with no access to ultimately funds like credit cards and loans, they would be in some deep water ultimately. So there was a lot of good things throughout the process which I've learned through experience, but ultimately I paid the bottom line, which was the pound note and the time. But overall, let's see what happened next. 8 years on. Now this is the best bit, guys. I have still got that property to date now. And actually, when I weigh it up against all my portfolio, and there's a little bit of this because we bought it so cheap, it actually is one of the best performing small buy-to-lets we have, right guys? Because the rental income per month now is £750 a month, which is extraordinary really, isn't it? The mortgage payment isn't that any month, and I'll take you through that in a moment's time. But £750 a month from that small property. There's been some things which have gone wrong throughout it. There was a collapse drain outside, insurance covered that. There was a tenant who, when they moved out, had a cat, 2 indoor cats, destroyed the carpets. Small things, but if you have the right protections in place, guarantor for the carpets, insurance for the collapse drain, you can mitigate some of the risk. But overall, over the 8 years, it's been superb. Capital appreciation. Now this is where the sweet spot lands. I am just in the process now of remortgaging that property. One, because I like to take out cash to utilise elsewhere in projects, and I've got a big project coming on going now, which you'll see in later videos. But that property has now been valued at circa 95,000, which is superb. It hasn't went up as expected, you know, as trainees say, or educators say rather. Oh, it's tripled and all that good stuff within the years. It's went up over a modest amount of time. But what that's allowed me to do then is pull a good proportion of cost back out of the property. That means the mortgage payment's gone up, but that means my rental yield's gone up early. So overall, 8 years on, I've managed to extract all my money. And not only that, guys, I've had circa 7 years worth of rent from the property. Now there's been a bit of fluctuation in terms of, you know, it started off with 500, then I think it went to 675 and that tenant went out, but it's 750 now. And I can tell you now, over the 7 years it's been rented out, it's been continuous. You know, once the tenants moved out, a bit of liquor paint happened in the property itself, a bit of money spent onto it. You know, it's been vacant for no more than 2 months between those given periods. But overall, the property is absolutely ace. And a part of me, because it was one of the first ones, and don't hold me account to, yes, I have a personal home, what I rented out, and my second home, but one of my first ones where I went through the BRRR strategy, ultimately, it's got a bit of sentimental value to myself, because, you know, I was actually the person there with my partner doing everything I needed to do. I remember my daughter was, God, she must have been not even 1 at that point. I used to drop her off at my mum and dad's. I used to go to the property, the weekends and so forth. Very supportive, you know, very supportive clique. That brings me to the latter one. Experience, that is something worth its weight in gold, guys. You can go on all the education programs you want to do. You can spend as much money as you want to spend on education. But ultimately, you need to roll your sleeves up. You need to get stuck into it. There is a but though. Buying the right deal at the right time, the right area is absolutely fundamental. So don't get blased with the experience statement. Yes, it was good 8 years on. It wasn't good at the time, and I would have done things different if someone guided me through the process, right? But ultimately, it gave me that experience to understand how do I deploy better methodologies moving forward. Schedule of works, you know, understanding trades, understanding when trades are just not right fit for yourself and don't react under desperate measures because your time's of the essence. All that good stuff, guys, comes with experience. And I go back to, do your education. You fundamentally need it. You need it. Otherwise, you'd fall into the trap I did. If I go back up, you'll fall into that trap with no education, no guidance. But where you need to be is mentored if you're not used to the experience, or pull on people who you know who've been through the process before. Now, go back to what do we offer. Bear in mind, guys, it was a bit of a risk-taking exercise doing this video, because I go back to all the educators out there. I don't think I've ever seen anyone take you through any bad deals. I've never seen anything, but I thought, what's better? Either guiding you through a process where I've not been burnt myself and developed and learned from that experience, or actually giving you false pretenses and ultimately taking you through a process where there is no risk. You know, there is no ill gain from doing this process. And by God, if you get things wrong, and imagine scaling that property up by, it was a house in the auction for 150k. You know, you could get your fingers really burned through that process. So what we offer now, through the life cycle of those 8 years, you know, started off fairly one-dimensionally sighted. We bought a property we didn't really know about. Fast forward to 8 years, we are thriving. We are thriving. And you'll see through the investors of which we buy properties for, project management, and then do the lettings at the back end, they love us. Absolutely love us. The properties we buy are fundamentally great financially. Appreciation, you name it, they're superb. Do we still get burnt a few times along the process? Yeah, it would be wrong for me to say that I don't. But the packages we offer to make sure that you don't get burnt at the start of your process is the bronze package. The bronze package is all the facilitation of the paperwork to enable you guys to make sure that you're keeping trades on the hook to deliver what they're meant to hook, or to deliver what they're meant to sign up for. It delivers all the pricing scenarios to make sure that you are actually buying the right property to enable you to pull the cash out, or to leave in a relatively small amount of cash in which you're happy to do. It takes you through the auction processes. It takes you through the deal sourcing processes. All those things which you can collate together to understand from a paper-based theory. And the key thing is, under the bronze, paper-based theory, how to mitigate the risks I went through 8 years ago, guys. I'll say it again, paper-based theory. If you want to trawl through all the paperwork, that is the right process for yourselves. We do offer the silver service, which is an accommodation of the paperwork and specific YouTube videos, which will guide you through ultimately every bit of documentation which is part of that. So whether it's how to prepare a deal to sell to someone, whether that's how to break out the deal to make sure that the renovation costs are, you know, prepared in the right manner and then financially put into the data sheet correctly, whether that's how you do your scope of work, whether that's how you do your drawings, your interaction with building control, HMO officers, whatever it may be, the YouTube videos, which are private, will ultimately guide you through that process. And yes, some people might be watching this ultimately and be saying, well, we can get that all anyway. But the reason why I think Finnegan Group Academy will blow up is because of honesty. We don't sell a false story within this company. We can pull on bad experience of which me and my business partner and my partner have all went through with properties. And we talk about those very openly. Because ultimately, how do people learn if they don't understand the pros and the cons? You can network with our investors who can take you through all the good work we've done for all the individuals of which we work for. And if anyone was interested, you can go and talk with the permission. It's the tenants who let out the properties from us. I guarantee if there's an issue within one of our homes, or which we personally own, or whether it's the investor's home, within 24 hours, small or big, it's resolved. And that's just the sort of ethos we've got within our company, and that's ultimately how you can grow. But For the people who really want to get into property with a serious mindset and they had a bit of cash like I did at the start of the process, but let's assume they didn't use credit cards and loans, we have the gold mentorship. And basically what that means is they're for real hard hitting people who want to get into the process now, who want to be guided through the process now, who want to be told right, wrong or different what the trades are doing wrong, if the deal's good, bad or indifferent. They want to get through all that momentum now. Whereas the bronze and silver, it's a pure education piece, pure education. Documentation, very good. YouTube videos which are private, very good because they walk you through the documentation. The gold are for the hard hitters who want to get involved in property now but have little experience in that field. And ultimately that's where I come in, because I won't give you any of that benign stuff against this is a great deal just to sell something to yourselves. You know, this is a good project because you need to take it on. It's the real facts which people really avoid, and ultimately go back to what the BRRR cycle is all about. It is meant for buying a property at a good amount and refinancing it with leaving in as little money as you can. Now, the deal I presented up front, of which I bought 8 years ago, not a good deal if you want to look at the true ethos of what the BRRR strategy is. But ultimately, we will avoid you through the pitfalls that we went through. So get in touch, guys. Finnegan Group Academy.